Thank you. Well, thanks so much, Eric. God bless you all. Great to be here. So excited to be in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And, I do realize I always make sure to be very punctual. And I realize I'm a little late. I'm a year late for this, but we last year had visits from a young lady named Helene and a young fellow named Milton, and they weren't too nice to my state, and we had to do our duty to make sure that we got people up on their feet, and we were able to do that. In fact, with Hurricane Milton, we had 4.2 million people's power restored in 72 hours. That's a world record for hurricanes. So I'm glad to be here. I wanted to be here last year, but I also have young kids. So my wife and I have a daughter in kindergarten, a son in second grade, and a daughter in third grade. And so to be able to come up to Hershey with all this stuff, the kids were interested. However, there's a little bit of a problem. My kids, because the governor lives in Tallahassee, so we've been in Tallahassee since they can remember anything. And they're big Florida State football fans. And there's a football game this weekend, actually against Pitt, and I'll get to the result in a minute. And so my kids are kind of like, well, we don't know about Hershey, and especially my son. He's like a diehard, I don't want to miss the game. And I just told them, I said, guys, you may never get to go to Hershey. Who knows, right? I mean, it's a great opportunity. We want to go. We want to do all those things. And so the girls were like, okay. And then I convinced my son to do Hershey. So we got in yesterday. We were out at the amusement park, taking them to the rides and doing all that stuff. Getting a lot of trick-or-treat candy. They definitely got that. There was candy when we got there, all this stuff, which is fun. But then this morning, we were able to go to the chocolate world, and they got to make their own Hershey candy bar. They got to do some of the other things, tour the town, go see the school, and do all these things. And so they were really excited about that. We were able to watch some of the Florida State game, and Florida State lost to Pitt. And so my son said, Daddy, I made the right decision to come to Hershey. So it has proven the old Hershey Company motto that, yes, there is, in fact, a smile in every Hershey bar. It's interesting, though, being here. I've actually been here before when I was a congressman way back in the day. I've recovered from that experience, don't worry. We did a function here at some point, and we were there. And I did the golf course here, which a lot of people don't realize. This golf course is where Ben Hogan really learned how to hit the ball like he came to do. He had a teacher here and all that stuff, and he may not have ended up being the Ben Hogan had he not done that. It's also interesting. This is just stuff I do. So coming to Hershey, so I watch a documentary on like how the candy war started or something. It was actually pretty good, and they were talking about when Milton Hershey founded this, what they were doing and everything like that. And then one of his employees, a guy named H.B. Reese, had this idea to do chocolate with peanut butter in it. And so he'd do it, and he shows it to Mr. Hershey. And Hershey said, that ain't going to fly. I don't think we're not going to do it. So H.B. Reese went out on his own, started what became Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And I think Hershey was a very smart businessman because he realized pretty soon he needed to buy Reese's Cups for him, and he did. And then now that's the most popular candy in the world, and it's right here in Hershey, Pennsylvania. So interesting fact, interesting part of history. I'm here today to deliver, I think, a pretty optimistic message. There's oftentimes a temptation to look around the world that we live in, and we see that the left has controlled the commanding heights of our society for many, many years and decades even. When you look around, if you are trying to defend life, if you're trying to defend family, a healthy culture, constitutionally sound government, you usually are fighting an uphill battle. And that's just the way it's been for a long time. But I'm here to tell you that in spite of that, if you stand for truth, if you fight the big battles, and if you deliver huge victories, you can win against the left. And you can do so resoundingly. And that's what we've done in Florida. And it's not just like, oh, I want to brag about it. It's like political tit for tat. I look around the country, and obviously when I became governor of Florida, I was looking at what's going on in Florida. But I also know when things happen in other parts, like there's certain parts where it'll start, San Francisco, then it goes here. And so you can look to see what the left is cooking up and what they may try to bring to your state. And it just occurred to me, looking at all this, that on almost every issue that matters, the left was aggressively hostile to the positions that I believe in, you believe in, and that really are important to make sure that the states that we govern can do well. And so I said, yes, like I got to take care of business. If a hurricane comes, we got to deal with it. We do that very well. If you have situations where, provide tax relief to people, do some of the things that you can do in the policy realm that are more traditional. Do good on all that stuff. But my duty, one of my duties, was to protect the people that I was elected to serve from the pathologies of the political left. In any sphere that I could, in any artery of society, I was not going to cede 1 inch to these people, and I was going to make sure that we got the job done. There was an old phrase that was popularized in after World War II, kind of in the middle of the 20th century, 50s, 60s, by William F. Buckley, who founded National Review, wrote God and Man at Yale. And he said, our purpose here is to stand to thwart history and yell stop, because you had communism advancing around the world. You did have it advancing in our own society, and people like Alger Hiss and the Rosenbergs and all this stuff. And he said, we got to stop it and do that. But as I looked at how the left had taken over so many institutions, just simply saying stop and not letting them advance anymore, that was not, may have won a battle, but that loses you the war. So I wasn't content with just doing that. I wanted to aggressively regain these institutions and regain this ground for the values that we all hold dear. And so, yes, we set out to protect our folks from the left. Yes, we made sure that we would stand for what's right. And you can't just be kind of, tiptoeing around the tulips on this. You either win or you lose on these issues, and we have decisively defeated the left more than any other state has ever done in the modern history of the conservative movement, without question. And some of the things that we have done have been mentioned. We defeated the gender radicals by, yes, I see they're doing the Supreme Court on women's sports. We did that like 6 years ago in Florida. We made sure to ban the mutilation of minors with these gender surgeries. On every single issue that the left was pushing, not only did we stop it, but we rolled it back, and we made sure that people were protected. We beat the left and people like Fauci on COVID. They wanted to take away rights. They wanted you to be locked in your house. They didn't want you going to church. They didn't want kids going to school. And on all of those key issues, we not only stood up for what was right, we did it when it was not popular. And I tell people, I've been involved in campaigns, I've been involved in all these issues, all this stuff. And the fact of the matter is, like when you're governor or when you're a candidate, you roll out of bed and they're attacking you. Like, that's just what happens. Like that, I'm getting attacked before I even get my morning coffee. That's just life. And you kind of learn to deal with it. And that's fine. If you take all the attacks, all the smears, everything, in the entire time I've run or been in elected office, you added it all up and you compared it to what I was dealing with, particularly in those early weeks and months of COVID, it's not even close. The COVID attacks were way more. The smears were way more, because I was standing against the machine. I was standing against the designs that they had for this country. And had we not stood up, we would have never liberated this country from those restrictions. And so we played a vitally important role to make sure people's livelihoods were protected, their businesses were protected, and kids had the ability to actually be educated in school in person. And now nobody wants to admit that they opposed me on any of that stuff. Isn't it funny? They were all telling me I was making big political mistake at the time. We've beat the left, and we beat people like George Soros on crime. You have in this country these prosecutors that are funded by Soros and other organs of the left, and they get in and they have an agenda to simply not prosecute criminals. We see it in Philadelphia with this guy Krasner. Has been a total disaster and has harmed a lot of people because of the dereliction of duty. Well, we have had 2 Soros prosecutors in Florida, one in Tampa and one in Orlando, and I removed both of them from their posts. And I'm the only governor in the country to do that. We beat the left and beat the teacher unions by enacting universal school choice for every single Florida family. We also defeated them by enacting strong protections for the rights of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their children. The fact of the matter is, these unions are trying to impose a partisan left agenda on our school kids. And you have a right as a parent to send your kid to school to be educated and not indoctrinated. No. And as was mentioned by Eric, we beat the left and we beat the abortion extremists by enacting the strongest pro-life legislation in the history of Florida, the Heartbeat Bill, that has saved many, many thousands of innocent human lives. We have defeated the left as well as a cadre of Marxist professors in our state university system. The purpose of our university system is not to impose an ideological agenda or groupthink on students. The purpose of our university is to serve the traditional function of what a university should be: the pursuit of truth, the promotion of academic rigor, and ultimately preparing our students to be citizens of this republic. So in the state of Florida, we were the first state to eliminate DEI from our public university system. We've also enacted trailblazing legislation, which you guys should try to do here if you could ever get a governor that would sign it, is all tenured professors in Florida must undergo a review every 5 years and can be terminated for poor performance. We defeated the left as well as these international elites that go to places like the World Economic Forum in Davos by eliminating ESG from our pension fund, as well as banning the imposition of a central bank digital currency. They want to be able to turn off your access to your own money and control your purchases. We snuffed that out very early on in the process. And yes, as was mentioned, we actually had to go toe-to-toe with the most powerful political force in the state of Florida's history, a company you may have heard of in Orlando that operates theme parks and does a lot of other stuff called Walt Disney. But the reason why we did that was not because we were trying to make a scene, but because we believed in a very important principle. Parents in this state, in our state, any state, have a right to send their kids to school without their kids being told that they were born in the wrong body or that their gender was a choice. That is just fundamentally wrong to be injecting that into our school system. They had a different view on that. They got aggressive in their way. You know, we did what we did. Most people said that I was not going to be able to sustain that position because no one had ever gone against them and lived to tell about it. Well, here I am. And then what was mentioned that we had to deal with these amendments. So there's actually 2 amendments that we had to do. So in Florida, I don't know how it is in Pennsylvania, but there are these initiatives, which is really just what special interests do. They get on the ballot, and then they put things on, and then the voters just kind of see a synopsis of it that's kind of poll tested, all this stuff. You know, it's basically a sham the way it operates. But you had an amendment that would mandate abortion till birth, eliminate parental consent, and even allow non-physicians to perform abortions, which, I mean, give me a break. So the most extreme, people were saying the most radical extreme amendment in the country. And then we also had one for marijuana, which was not just like, decriminal. It was like a constitutional right to possess and smoke it, including in public, and giving one marijuana company a lot of benefits. And so the two most expensive ballot initiatives in the history of the United States of America are the Pro-Abortion Amendment 4, 2024 in Florida, and the Pro-Marijuana Amendment 3, also 2024 in Florida. So we are in a situation where, we govern successfully. I made promises. I delivered on every promise, and then more so. The state was doing well. We've basically rendered the Democrats irrelevant in the state of Florida. When I became governor, we were the most important swing state. Wasn't Pennsylvania, it was us. Now it's Pennsylvania. We were a 1-point state. And so I came in 2018, and we had 300,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. We had never had more registered Republicans in the history of Florida. Today, we have 1.4 million more registered Republicans than Democrats. So, and I've considered placing the Florida Democratic Party on the state's endangered species list. I don't know. I don't want to give them any extra protection, though, but we'll see. So the point is that we won all these victories. The public responded by either Republicans coming to Florida or people changing their registration. And that we made it so that it's very difficult for a Democrat to show their face and get elected in most parts of Florida. So how bad would it be? You win and then I got reelected by the biggest margin in the history of the state for a Republican in 2022. So how is it that you can do all that right, and then somehow you got people that are going to spend a lot of money to basically make us California through the back door with these initiatives and these amendments? The marijuana people spent $150 million on this. The abortion people spent $130 million. So we had to contend with $280 million of spending on very misleading language and let's just be honest, they were pushing issues in which probably more people agreed with them than agreed with me or agreed with us. Marijuana was somewhat popular. Abortion, in terms of the pro-life, a lot of Floridians are not necessarily pro-life. I didn't do it to be popular. I did it because it was the right thing to do. So we were having to deal with navigating all this. And so, the governor, I don't have a role in these amendments. Like, these special interests got them on. The court approved them to be on, which we thought was a mistake. And then they try to get the voters to approve it. And so, most people that get elected in my positions like mine, all their advisors say, stay away from this. There's nothing for you to gain by getting involved in this. All you're going to do is alienate supporters or whatever. And that may be true, but that also wouldn't be the right thing to do. It wouldn't be the morally right thing to do. So I was in a position, I had this platform as governor. I had a megaphone. There were things being proposed that would be harmful for my state. In the case of the Amendment 4, it would have been very costly in terms of human lives, tens of thousands, just in a year. In terms of the marijuana, you can't function as a state if you smell marijuana everywhere, if these kids are doing it. And this isn't the marijuana they had in Woodstock. This is really, really, dangerous stuff. So it would have been terrible for Florida. So I could just sat back and just kind of let it happen with chips. Hey, I know I was against them, but what am I going to do? That's not right. So we dug in. We barnstormed the state. We made the case to the people of Florida. And we were the first state not just to defeat an abortion, but also in a marijuana. And we did it in the same year, in the same election, against $280 million. And that is not easy to do. So I think the common theme through all this is, one, you've got to have the proper outlook. You have to have the proper philosophical foundation. You have to have the right political convictions. If you can't even do that, then obviously you're probably not going to be getting all this stuff done. But that's not enough, because there are people, that believe the right things, that have that insight. But the question is, when it gets hot in the kitchen, is that something that you're going to be able to stand? Because when you go against the left, when you go against the media, when you go against the commanding heights of our society, corporate America, all this other stuff, you do not do that in a way that people aren't going to be taking shots at you. Leadership is not cost-free. When you step out and you lead, especially on these issues, you are going to face blowback. They're going to attack you. They're going to smear you. They're going to lie about you. That's just what's happened. And you've got to have the courage of the convictions. You got to understand that the leader has got to be out there calling the plays, calling the shots, and bringing all this in for a landing. And that's just the cost of doing business. And so when you have people that are willing to do that, dig in, know that it's not going to be easy, but it's still going to stand what's right, and not worry about blips in public opinion. Look, I mean, the way you do what the people think, I run on a platform, I tell them what I believe in, and then they validate that, and then I go do it. If the poll shifts one way, I haven't taken a poll, by the way, since I've been governor. Just so you know, not one time have I taken a poll to say, so you see me doing these initiatives? None of those are poll tested. That's me doing what I think is right to be able to follow through on promises I made to voters, or as new issues come up, doing things that in the direction that I want to do. So that's really what's right. Be a leader. Don't be a follower. Steve Jobs on Apple, he would never do focus groups on the Apple products. And people say, well, why wouldn't you do it? He's like, it's my job to show the folks what they want. I don't want to just see, how they react. I could take a poll of this room on something, and if it's against my position, but I have the ability to go out and make the case, deliver the results. And guess what? If you do that, even if people weren't with you, a lot of times they will be with you. So you got to be willing to go out there and lead. You got to be able to do what's right. One final issue, apart from all that, but don't let anyone tell you that this stuff can't be done. Because I was told you're going into a swing state, you can't be bold, you got to trim your sails. But I believe, like President Reagan said, we're better when we're flying the banner of bold colors, not pale pastels. We showed a sharp contrast between our agenda and the political left. They obviously have a lot of very bad positions. And so we made sure that the people saw those differences. And so we not only attracted people that agreed with us, we had people shift who had previously not agreed with our side, and we've built this really big reservoir. So it can happen, but it only happens, you only move the needle when you're bold. You only move the needle when you're strong. Nobody wants to go out and get excited to vote for some squish who has a spine of linguine. That's not the way people get excited to want to go out and be part of this process. So that's it. And so what are we looking for kind of going forward as something? And I just have to make a comment or two about this big tech, what they're up to with artificial intelligence. That's all the rage. That's what's powering the stock market. They're building all this stuff. They're promising all these different things. And a couple points I'll make. One, we should welcome technologies that enhance the human experience, but I'm not interested in subsidizing or furthering technologies that seek to supplant the human experience. We, as individuals, are what this country was made about. God endowed us with unalienable rights, not to subcontract that out to a bunch of machines. I do think that you have people who are pushing this, who have this transhumanist impulse, and I think that's incredibly destructive for society. I also think that if you look at what they have designs on it, you do this chatbot, you do this, they're going to tell you answers and all this stuff. Let me tell you, none of those chatbots are worth anything beyond whether the data that's being fed into them is accurate or not. Garbage in, garbage out. So let me ask you, as this becomes more pervasive, if it does, do you trust a handful of titans in big tech to be the curators of all the information that's going to be impacting our education, our businesses, our culture? I don't trust them. And I know our founding fathers wouldn't have trusted them. The whole premise of the American Constitution was that human nature is flawed, And you didn't want to see a consolidation of power in any one place, so they had a judicial branch, executive branch, legislative branch, and they divided that into two different houses, House and Senate. And then they had state governments, which were the creators of all this, that retained their powers, and you had a check and balance, a vertical check and balance. And the founders were very much concerned about that. Well, let me tell you something, and you can see it in Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun, okay? Human nature has not changed from the time that was written thousands of years ago until 1787 when our Constitution was drafted, and until 2025 as we stand here today. The defects in human nature, the propensity of people to abuse power and to use power they have to push their agenda, to manipulate things, that has not changed at all. And if big tech companies have the ability to be in charge of a lot of this data and they're doing all this, well, guess what? They are going to abuse that power. So I think it's up to us as people that are policymakers to make sure that we're going into all this with our eyes wide open. I think that we need to do artificial intelligence Bill of Rights for individuals so that you have protections against having your rights violated. I mean, think about it. They're going to be able to do a video where they can take your name or take your image and put words in your mouth that people very well may believe. Well, what if that's done in a way that's harming you? I'm sorry, that's not a First Amendment issue. That's a taking your name, image, and likeness issue. So nobody's really talking about it. People are saying, oh, it's basically, everyone's going to be wealthy, all this other stuff. Well, some of these companies may be. And actually, some of them are saying, oh, this is going to somehow be so great. And they're bragging that it's going to cost millions of people their jobs. I don't think that's great if people are losing jobs. So they think that this is somehow going to, deliver us into some type of domestic nirvana, but it's probably much more likely, to plunge us into some type of dystopian technocracy. And these are things that are happening right now. There's not a lot of debate about any of this stuff. But this is going to continue to be a major, major issue. And I can just tell you, the folks that are pushing this and a handful of those companies do not think like you think on any of these different issues. And with that, I know we're going to do some question and answer. So just let me say thank you to the group here in Pennsylvania. We've had, my father is from Western Pennsylvania, so I've got a lot of roots in the Keystone State. And then growing up in Dunedin, Florida, I was a stone's throw away from Philly spring training in Clearwater, Florida. And so we went to a lot of that over the years. And so we've got a lot of friends here that we've made over the years. And I know that the folks that are in this room, you want to see the same things for Pennsylvania that we've been able to deliver from Florida. And it's not easy. Don't let me tell you it's easy. That's not my message. But my message is it's possible. You just need the leadership, and you just need the courage to get it done. God bless everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Governor. It's just great to sit here next to you. I'll just simply say that, because I've looked from afar, just so impressed with what has happened in the state of Florida, and it's because of your leadership, because of the bold colors rather than the pale pastels. As I think about this evening, this is actually something that Eric pointed out to me. We have 1,600 people here, 1,600 Pennsylvania, and Ron DeSantis. Kind of like that sound together. So don't take that too far away there, Josue. There's a table that went away. So my first question, because your leadership is unusual. It's not that typical of what we see in the larger national political class or governors and things. Not casting aspersions or anything else, but what is it about? Where would you say that comes from? Is it your upbringing? You mentioned your dad being from Western Pennsylvania. What is it in your history that sort of gave you the courage to stand firm on so many of these things when you're taking it on the chin and all of the things that are coming against you?
Well, look, I mean, you get out of bed, and as I mentioned in the morning before I get my morning coffee, they're hitting me on something. But as I'm getting ready, I'm, shaving, brushing my teeth, and I'm looking in the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, Do you want to be able to have confidence that you did the right thing for the right reason? Here I am, the governor of the third largest state in the country, probably the most important Republican state, in the country now. And, I believe God put me there for a reason. I don't think he put me there to be like any other, politician who's just trying to govern by polls or trying to do whatever they can to protect their own political hide. I think you have a chance to really do things that are meaningful. That's not easy, but, I just have the foundation of, faith in God. I have a strong understanding of what went into founding this country. I understand how the founding fathers approached leadership and what they thought was important. And I'm also just in a situation where, like with COVID, for example, most of the decisions I was making at the time are probably the best decisions I've made, really saved the state, but they were all very, very unpopular. I had a lot of people that wished me well, that were concerned, like, oh, you're ruining your future, you're not going to be able to get elected again, all this other stuff. And, I just had to, I didn't know, right? I did not know. Because you can do good things, and sometimes the voters may not necessarily appreciate that until it's too late. And so I didn't know how the political winds would blow. I didn't know how the political chips would fall. But what I knew is, a leader is going to care more about protecting the jobs of the people he was elected to serve than he is about protecting his own job or his own political hide. And I've just got to do that. I have got to stand up for people when they need a champion. And if that costs me my position, then so be it. I'll be able to know that when people needed me, I stood up and did the right thing for the right reason.
So you talked about Amendment 4 down in Florida and that issue we're fighting. Here in Pennsylvania, there's a Planned Parenthood brought a lawsuit against the state because taxpayer funding is not legal in Pennsylvania right now for abortion. But the Supreme Court justices sitting on the bench are favorable towards that Planned Parenthood suit to allow for not only taxpayer funding, but those same justices seem inclined towards granting what Planned Parenthood wants, which is a right to abortion in our Constitution for them to declare it by judicial fiat. Why do you think that it's so important to fight on the issue of abortion? Why did you take the leadership there in Florida?
Well, we actually were coming out of having all that had already happened in Florida over many decades. So we had a very liberal Supreme Court for decades. They ruled that the Florida Constitution, which does not mention abortion, created this regime that was actually more radical than the Planned Parenthood versus Casey regime that was enacted by the Supreme Court in 92, kind of on the heels of Roe in 73. And so when we were doing Heartbeat Bill, that we also had to navigate the court, our own court on that. The court, largely because of better appointments, they overturned that series of cases and upheld the Heartbeat Protection Act. So we were very happy with that, but that took a lot of work to be able to get there. So what I would say is, you got to do what's right, and that's what we did. I mean, the Heartbeat Bill, I had a lot of people when that was on my desk, because remember, the 22 midterms, so Biden was president, he was terrible, and so normally you would have a rebound for the opposite party. So Republicans were thinking we were going to have a big red wave. Now, we did have it in Florida, but we face-planted in most of the country. And so what the consultants and some of the donor class was saying, oh, it was because of being pro-life. That's why Republicans did so poorly in the midterms. Although, look at me. I signed pro-life legislation. I won the biggest Republican victory in the history of my state. So I don't think that was accurate, but I do think that was out there. And so I think a lot of people have just been told, hey, you just got to move away, that you shouldn't be worrying about the sanctity of life. I think that's a mistake because it's not the right thing to do. But even amongst that political analysis, huge opposition in almost any state but the very most liberal for taxpayer funding of abortions. It's a toxic position. And when they're linked to that, it's toxic. Late-term abortions, very, very toxic position. The thing they try to do in Florida without even requiring a physician, just basically saying, you can have some technician or some clerk at Planned Parenthood performing abortions, that was considered way, way out of bounds. And so, I think on those issues, you are in the right with public opinion. You're right on the policy. But you do have the public behind you. They do not want tax dollars going to it, and they certainly know that their state's constitution does not mandate that, because what they will say is that the funding is a constitutional right that flows from the underlying created right.
So here in Pennsylvania, our Supreme Court and judges are elected. So unlike many other states where they're appointed, so the people in this audience, people have the decision to make about who's on the court and who's not. So as they consider that issue, and what we don't have in Pennsylvania, and it's not a threat to us, at least at this stage, is a ballot initiative where you had to spend millions and millions of dollars. So the engagement of citizens in this audience, people in this audience and across the state, can have a very valuable influence as they engage in the political process and in voting and all of those sorts of things. So that's really significant. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Eric to come back up and give folks here in the audience an opportunity to consider supporting the work of the Pennsylvania Family Institute. But this audience, and I know many of the people who are here, we have many new friends and guests here as well, but I know these are praying people, and they take the Bible seriously that tells us to be praying for those in authority. You're here in Hershey, Pennsylvania, with a wonderful wife, First Lady of Florida, and children. How can these folks be praying for the DeSantis family and for you?
Well, we appreciate it. We've been very fortunate to receive prayers across the country for many, many years. My wife got diagnosed with breast cancer in the fall of 2021. We had basically a daughter who was 18 months, and our other kids were a little bit older than that. And so the outpouring that she got, there were people that were doing prayer groups for her in California and in Illinois and in Wisconsin, and so it was meaningful. And I think that it's still meaningful in terms of what we're doing on a daily basis. But one thing I'll just point out about what you're doing, even apart from supporting someone like me, is you're standing for issues and ideas that don't have necessarily a lot of funding behind them, right? We knew Amendment 4, part of the issue was they're very well funded. Do you think I can go down to Palm Beach and meet with those Republican donors that they're going to give a lot of money on abortion? No. These are people that are just, more socially liberal on some of those things, and they're not going to put the money, or even if they're more conservative, they're not going to put money with their name on it because they're concerned about some type of blowback. And so just know what you're doing is serving a function to stand for things that are really fundamental to the founding of this country, really fundamental to who we are as Americans, but they may not be something that's easily to be monetized. There may not be a lot of vested economic interests that are going to come to the rescue and just save everybody with that. So it just requires, you got to scrap, you got to work hard, and yeah, I think you got to pray. I think it's meaningful, and I think it matters.
Well, I'm going to invite Eric to come up. I just want to say, as I mentioned earlier when I introduced him, Eric is one of our newest colleagues in the Family Policy Council movement, and just from what I've gotten to know him just over this short period of time since he started at Florida Family Voice, you hire quality people, and I just congratulate you for that and for the work that he did in doing that church outreach, which we want to mirror here in Pennsylvania. So let's thank Governor Ron DeSantis for joining us here. Thank you.